Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rico Borrego.
I am your other co-host, Tony Borrego.
And this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, the podcast with its arms wide open, almost. Today, we are coming back with our album for album series. Last week, we talked about Tony's suggestion of the Velvet Revolver album, Contraband. And today, we are talking about my suggestion of Alter Bridge's third album titled AB3, released in 2010. It's called AB3 because it is their third album. Now, this is going to be kind of an interesting episode because if you're not aware of Alter Bridge, they are a, I would call them a hard rock band, but I know they get sometimes labeled as like alternative metal, progressive metal. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Well, that's what this genre of this album is considered.
Really?
Yeah. And we'll get into that. But
when did this album come out?
2010.
2010. I don't
Thank you for listening to the intro of this episode.
I'm sorry. I totally was not.
And yeah, so if you don't know Alter Bridge, they are basically if you know the band Creed, they are Creed, but instead of Scott Stapp as the lead singer, you have Miles Kennedy. And they are probably I would say the heaviest band that I listen to regularly. And even then I've never heard all of their albums. And I will say this is kind of like far and above my favorite album of theirs, which is why I gave it to Tony. But yeah, I don't listen usually to metal at all, any forms of metal really. So I thought this would be an interesting one to give Tony. Really quick, I got into them because our grandmother Lita heard their hit song Watch Over You when it was used as a commercial and music video for the MTV show Celebrity Rehab. And I listened to the song from her suggestion and I enjoyed it. And I decided I wanted to check out the rest of their music and found out, oh, wow, Watch Over You is like one of their only like slower acoustic ballads. They're like a kind of a harder rock band.
So and Watch Over You is the one where he's like, "Who's gonna save you?" with the voices and the falsetto.
Yeah, and it does get a little rock. Pretty. Yeah, and it gets a little rock near the end, but like I wouldn't have thought that they were, way heavier than that song. And for some reason, this must have been right before this album dropped. I got into them. So when this album dropped, I listened to it and actually really, really enjoyed it. And I went back and listened to Blackbird, the album with Watch Over You. And I enjoyed it, but not as much for some reason. And then the album after this, probably that's my second favorite of theirs. But then everything after that, I just felt like they became a little too formulaic. And it just, I don't know, for some reason, this album is just like, I really, really enjoy it. I don't think it's like a perfect album, but it is probably one of my favorite albums when it comes to like a harder rock sound. So Tony, what is you obviously know Watch Over You. I mean, did you know a lot of their stuff going into this album? I know you probably didn't really know any songs from this particular album.
Yeah, I didn't know any from this album. So yeah, I did know Watch Over You. I did know I don't even know how to say it, but the Rated R Superstars entrance song. And then I knew Anastasia, actually. Oh,
well, that's
I know it's not Alter Bridge, but it's Miles Kennedy. And I do kind of know Going to California, another Slash tune with Miles, right?
Yeah, so I would say you're more familiar with, and Creed, some of Creed's songs.
Yeah,
so.
I do know Arms Wide Open, and as of today, I also know Higher.
Yeah, and like, yeah, I've actually, so the reason I'm a kind of, I would say I'm an Alter Bridge fan is really Miles Kennedy. I actually think his voice is one of the best rock vocalists, like, especially when it comes to like, I would say heavier rock, and I actually even went back and listened to his first band called the Mayfield 4. Their second album is fantastic. Also, I might give you that one down the road, but they're I would say they're just more like a rock band. They're not as like quote unquote metal like Alter Bridge, but
and I do know one of their songs. I know Summer Girl mostly for that epic note.
Yeah, and that's just to prove. I guess my point. Yeah, my point was to prove that like I think Miles Kennedy's voice is just phenomenal, but it is an acquired taste. I mean I do think he can be a little nasally, and his vocals fit some songs and other songs maybe not so much. I don't really like his stuff with Slash so much. I like those first two songs on Slash's I think second solo album, but I don't really care or listen to like all the other Slash and Miles Kennedy stuff. But I think Miles
Do you
Kennedy has a great
like
voice.
like for example, do you like Anastasia? Do you like Going to Cali?
No, yeah, I like the two songs that are on that one Slash album, Going to Cali and then Starlight. I like those two. Anastasia's okay, but like that's to me where it just it's kind of like it's almost kind of got like a Velvet Revolver sound, but I do actually think that like Scott Wilden is like he was more of an interesting frontman. Where Miles Kennedy's not interesting, he's just a really solid singer. So I almost think it's probably more fun when you listen to Velvet Revolver than like Miles Kennedy and Slash and the conspirators or whatever they're called. But I like none of it is bad, but I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to it necessarily. But Alter Bridge, I would go out of my way to listen to. Like I said, I've heard a decent amount of their albums, and I love this album. So I'm very curious because I know the last month when we were talking about like Death Cab, you were wanting some more, heavier rock songs, at least from them. And this is by far the heaviest thing I've given you. I mean, this is like night and day to some of the other bands I've given you, like Phoebe Bridgers, is like the complete opposite of that. So I'm very curious what you thought going into the album, and then like what you thought after giving it some listens.
Well, let me start off by saying something that you kind of brushed on actually. You were saying that Miles Kennedy, I mean there's no doubt, amazing singer. As far as like hard rock and metal goes, he's definitely one of the ones that have impressed me the most. Um and what's really cool too is he's so consistent as well. Sometimes you get some singers that they can pull off one great album, but that's about it. But from everything I've heard from him, his vocals have been really top notch. But the part that you kind of had mentioned that I can really get down with is that I don't think he's the most interesting singer. None of his. So when I think back to my favorite Miles moments on the album, it's never, oh, I really liked how he delivered this line, or oh, I really like the way he said this word. It's more so, oh, I like that part where he goes off at the end. So for me, he's not the most engaging. And I think the biggest gripe I have, which I might as well get this out of the way off my chest, is they overuse the heck out of that whole major third resolution in a rock song. It's all over this album. I've heard it in their other work, some of the other stuff Miles been in. Do you know what I'm talking about here?
I do to a certain degree, and I have a feeling this episode, unlike maybe some of our other album problems, we're gonna get a little bit more into composition and music theory, which I'm definitely okay with. But I'm definitely letting you lead the conversation on that because you know more about that than I do. But I think I know exactly what you mean. Like I want to say like the first time you maybe even get that on this album is the opening track,
First song,
Slip
yep.
into Void. Like right before that solo, when it goes into that like double time feel, I think coming out of the solo, I think they do that exactly what you're talking about, where they go into the major instead of the minor.
Yeah, well, like for example, I think it is around there for that one. But what is it? Show me a sign in the verse. Like every line ends with it. And sometimes in the album it can be a little more subtle, and when it's done so, I actually really like it. I like Make It Right. I think that was one where they really nailed that sound. And like it even really emphasizes it with, I think the solo sounds like it's a Mixolydian idea, which to my knowledge kind of captures that major third resolution in a rap context like this. But okay, now that those main gripes are out of my way, it's just that's overdone, and I don't know. I don't think Miles writes melodies that really grab me. But let's go ahead and dive into some of the good here, because I don't want you to think I did not like this album, even though I just kind of pissed all over it. So when you gave me this album, I've always wondered, why do you like Alter Bridge? Because they're definitely probably like two rungs up of what you normally listen to for heavy music. There's a lot of like genuinely heavy like breakdown type riffs. There's a lot of just shredding solos. So when I heard the first song and then I heard the keys, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Maybe this is going to be a little more dynamic than I, had anticipated. And then, there's the cool kind of like low octave on the vocal. There's a really nice acoustic. This is all for Slip Into the Void. It's a really nice dynamic build. And here's one of the times where I do specifically like how he says something. I like how he says, "You don't belong here." It's really cool. And then when they kick into like the rock part, and you get Tremonti doing those slow unison bends, like that is pretty awesome. Like they just nailed that whole rock sound. It has an interesting structure. It's dynamic. Not necessarily my favorite solo on the album, but like that was a pretty damn good way to start the album. And I was like, okay, maybe I can see why Rico would like this band. And I think my problem with the album is that we didn't always get that level of dynamics, dimension, depth, whatever word you would like to say. I don't think we always got that on all the songs, and I think that made a lot of the songs kind of maybe like I was kind of saying with the Velvet Revolver, some of the songs are kind of replaceable. That being said, is that the only song with keys on it? 'Cause I don't know if I heard keys during the rest of it.
That's probably. I think that's the only time you get keys. And interestingly enough, I mean, just on the Wikipedia page, it doesn't even list that anyone played keys. And I know I've seen a reactor on YouTube react to that song specifically, and he didn't know if it was keys or like a weird guitar effect, but I almost feel like it has to be a keyboard of some kind.
It sounds like some keyboard.
But I don't even think on the couple ballads, I don't think there is any keyboard. So yeah, that's really the only song. So it's a little bit of an outlier for sure. But I agree with you. I totally love that sound. With the keys in the Slip to the Void song for sure.
Right. It's like, in that first two, I was like, this is kind of a lame, like key part, just because it's like just like an octave and maybe a fifth or something. But I actually really did like the ambiguity that kind of brought, and how like as when the other instruments came in, it kind of it really did flesh out the tonality of that section. That was kind of the intro to the album for me, and I was actually pretty happy with it. I was really happy. I was like, sweet, I'm gonna get down with this album. And then the next song came on, Isolation, which is a lot snappier from the start, and I actually really liked that one too. It was really solid for me. And I think this song kind of highlighted for me the things that I like about this album. So it has cool leads. It's got a nice catchy chorus. It even has the pre-solo has a pretty cool section. And then during the actual solo, it's in 5/4, which is a really nice detail, and it's cool doing it for like the solo section and then going back, just to standard 4/4 for the chorus, just really drive it home. But
we were texting about this the other night. You said Isolation, like the verses are in 10/4?
No, so it's during the solo.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because I think I was trying to count along to the verses, and I totally was not seeing where you were coming from when you said 10/4. I was like, was he thinking it was another song or something? But I didn't count this. I wasn't paying attention during the solo.
No, but it's pretty awesome. So okay, that
was the first single from the album, and actually, I think that's one of the highest charting singles out of any of their albums.
That's a good move, because that stands as one of my favorites on this album for sure. In fact, the first two are definitely two of the highlights for me. So I kind of walked you through my thought process and how this album opened up for me. And to me, what I was most excited for with this album is just kind of how we compare. This is a band that I would probably like more than you in theory.
Well, yeah,
I still think not to give too much away, but I think you definitely liked it more than me still. So, what are your thoughts on these first two songs? Did you think that I would have enjoyed them as much? How do you rank them on the album?
Well, really quickly, I do want to say that it's funny that this month for our album for album series, we gave each other these albums because I actually feel like if it was a different lead singer to Velvet Revolver, that seems like it would be a band, an album I would like more because it's more straightforward rock. Like it's nothing crazy. Like it's, that it almost seems like that's more my style. And this seems like it would be almost more your style, even though you're not really like your friend Ishan, where like you're really into all the progressive metal and rock and stuff. But because you are more interested in music theory and like composition and stuff, this album and type of band seems like it would be more fitted for your style than mine. But yeah, it is funny that you know you're more the fan of that Velvet Revolver album, and I'm more of a fan of this album.
Right. Plus the whole, the slight connection between Slash and Miles and
Yeah,
Velvet Revolver.
and
It's
I would
kind of
say
cool to bleed.
Slip in the Void is a top 5 song for me from this album, maybe top 3. I think it's fantastic. I think it sets up the album perfectly. Um, One thing I like about this album, I totally like, I wouldn't have expected you to get this from this album from your listens, but Miles has gone on record to say it's kind of a loose concept album, just in the sense that if you listen to I've not really listened to their first album in its entirety, but their second album, Blackbird, or their later albums, and then listen to this. This is probably their most darkest album, just from like a lyrical content and even just some of like the instrumentation, like not heavy, like hard hitting rock metal, like more just like every song is in a very minor key, and some of the slower ones aren't even ballads, like Show Me a Sign, All Hope Is Gone, like those are like slower kind of dirgier songs. Um and he's mentioned that like lyrically there's some themes that run throughout the album of like losing some type of faith and feeling like you're on your like not deathbed, but you're on the outs, and just looking at some of these song titles, Isolation, Slip to the Void, All Hope Is Gone,
Life Must Go On.
Yeah, Show Me a Sign, Breathe Again. Like they're very like dark sounding song titles. And I like that about this album. Like it to me, and I gave it to you for October. Not only did it come out in October of 2010, but I find it to be just like a really good cloudy, rainy day album for like October, just because it's like, I don't know, it just gives me those vibes. And I love Slipping to the Void. It's one of my favorites. I love like all the different sections that you mentioned, his vocals, the keyboard sound effect. And I love Isolation too. To me, that one's definitely more of like here's kind of our singles song from the album. And every one of their albums has that. Like you listen to the song, you're like, oh, this was clearly meant for like hard rock radio, but I still really enjoy it. Isolation, probably not a top 5, but I definitely like it. It's definitely in the top half of the record for me than the bottom.
So, okay, before we get too far gone from one of the points you just made, let me real quickly jump on it. So you were saying that this may be kind of like a concept album in a sense, and I definitely did not pick up on that, but I did notice how consistently dark the record sounded and how uniform it was, which actually I think kind of hurt it for me given the length of the album.
The album is too long, and
it's too one tone for being
I'm
this
shocked
long.
You didn't do me and said like, oh, and here's my version of the album where you cut songs.
Well, I thought about it.
There's 2 songs for me I would cut from this album to kind of cut the fat from it and make it leaner. There's 2 for sure I would cut. Make it a 12 song album, and it would be under an hour. And I think then I think this album would be, for what it is, a perfect album for me. Maybe it wouldn't be in my top 20 albums of all time, but I would consider it like for this genre perfect.
Okay, you know what? Okay, real quick, just on a whim here. So I'm gonna throw out maybe 3 songs that I could have cut.
Okay.
And keep in mind, I'm gonna be completely honest here. Some of the songs near the end of the album do kind of blur a little bit for me. And I'm not gonna say that they sound exactly all the same, although there is one song. But I do apologize if I maybe kind of blurred the lines a little bit here. But for me though, I think the ones I would have cut would have either been probably like Life Must Go On, and then either like um Coeur d'Alene, I'm not sure how you say it. I think probably those two, honestly. Maybe Fallout. It was like one of those three. Two of those three, I meant.
So I'm not surprised that you said life goes on, life must go on, because I'm assuming the reason you would cut it is because you already have a song kind of like it with Wonderful Life.
Yeah, and this one's just more boring.
I don't know. I like Life Must Go On because I think it's very pretty, and I think it's actually prettier than Wonderful Life. Lyrically though, like they're both kind of cliche, and I know they're the more hopeful moments on the album. I think lyrically though, Wonderful Life is probably better lyrically.
It definitely is, in my opinion.
Like the sun always sets and the moon, like that, and the chorus of Life Must Go On is very generic, but I really like the music and Life Goes On. Like, but I could see why you would cut at least one of those.
I will say Life Must Go On, I think is too boring for me, but Wonderful Life is maybe a little bit annoying for me. So
there is that bridge in Wonderful Life
where it gets heavy.
Yeah.
That's why I think I would keep that one, because it's a little more
you don't have that
dynamic.
Go on.
Oh, yeah. And that sick heavy bridge in it. It reminds me of Knights of Sidonia.
And Wonderful Life.
Yeah, I just realized that last night
since I've heard that song.
I will have to show you the part later, because to me it sounds pretty similar, and I mean that in a good way.
Yeah, you're talking about the Muse song, right?
Yeah, and disclaimer, I don't know. I only know like 4 Muse songs. There we go.
I unfortunately know more, but
wow.
And they both have life in the title, so like they're very much like very similar songs. So I totally get cutting one of those. I will say Coeur d'Alene and Fallout are growers for me. Like on the first dozen listens of this album when this album came out, those are like ones that I wouldn't go back to. But I really enjoy both. I think I I love the chorus in Fallout. It's very catchy, and I like it's a little bit of a faster paced song, especially because in the middle there is like okay, the two songs that come before Make It Right are kind of slower, and then after Make It Right, well, like
Still Remains isn't slower, is it? No, that one's like groovy. What are you talking about?
Okay, well, we're about to get to the songs I would cut, but I like Fallout. I think Coeur d'Alene is even more of a grower than Fallout, because Coeur d'Alene's very it's a very weird, like the verse is very weird sounding in general. But I really like the chorus of Coeur d'Alene as well. Like I kind of like Fallout, like it's very catchy, but it has to grow on you a little bit. And I do think like if you gave this album, if you go back to it in the future, I do think that one can grow on you. I personally would cut Still Remains, and I would cut Show Me a Sign.
Really? Okay. Hear me out. Okay. I'm gonna be a little bit of an advocate and then a little bit of a trash talker here. Okay. Still Remains. Now, this was kind of where I thought the album was kind of slowing down for me, but I actually appreciate that it's a little bit groovier there. And I think even though it's a little bit of a one-dimensional song and it has that major third melody thing going, I did like the grooviness of it. So I think it maybe is worth keeping for that. And additionally, I actually really liked Show Me a Sign. I thought it was the structure was kind of a little bit ambiguous. It's a little low key, and it starts off with the cool chordy riff, which, hear me out, is like the same as Coeur d'Alene, except it's just more interesting with like the rhythm and the placement of it. Where like Coeur d'Alene is like the two chords, but they're just there. There's nothing really special about the delivery. It's arpeggiated. Coeur d'Alene's arpeggiated, kind of like Fallout, which we just heard 2 songs ago. But I do like the dynamics of Coeur d'Alene, and I think that could kind of provide that replay value and grow on me more.
Yeah, so my only issue with Still Remains is I always forget how it sounds for some reason. Like, and my problem with this album, because it's so long, because there's 14 songs, and because this isn't my typical style of music I listen to, I completely agree with you that some of these songs blend in together. Still Remains, I always, like when it comes on, I enjoy it on the album. but I
Right.
always just forget how it sounds. And like, if I was to like rank the songs, it would just come like near the bottom. And then I think for me, "Show Me a Sign" is just too long. It's the longest song on the album.
Oh, is it really?
It's
Wow.
almost 6 minutes. It's like 3 seconds away from being 6 minutes. It's just too long, and it's just a little slow for me. You're right. Still Remains isn't slow. I went back and listened to it right now. You're right. It is like a bit of a faster tempo, but
It doesn't have as much depth though. It relies more off the riff as opposed to
yeah.
layers. Where I think "Show Me a Sign" has a lot of like layers and like there's a falsetto after the chorus.
Well,
You
and
know,
it's weird because like "All Hope Is Gone," that's a song you think I would think it's one of my least favorites, and it'd be one I would cut. But like, I don't know, something I like the riff and "All Hope Is Gone," and
no, I thought you would like it.
oh, why did you? Oh, well, I mean, I do like it, but I'm surprised you thought I would like it.
Yeah, and you know why I thought you'd like it?
Why?
Because okay, even though it's in like it's in 3/4, which is cool, and it's got, you know, like kind of the riff with like picked out chords. And it's on the edge of Pirates of the Caribbean for me. But
Like the soundtrack?
well, yeah, kind of the whole sea shanty thing.
You think it's sea chanty?
Well, I don't like saying sea shanty because I don't fully understand that term. But it's a little piratey. But the
Like the
reason I think you
vocal
would like
melody?
it, no, just like the whole 3/4 thing, just the way the song kind of swaggers.
Okay.
But it sounds like it would be a storytelling song, which I think is why you would like it. But the lyrics aren't storytelling, and I will say
Yeah,
this:
because Miles Kennedy's not really one of those storytelling lyricists.
there was I didn't look up the lyrics for every song, but I did look them up for like probably like half of them, and there was not one lyric that I thought was really interesting that came close to grabbing me. That, you know, and if it didn't feel like a generic line, like I'm not gonna act like it's all generic or anything. It didn't touch me, and then the vocal delivery didn't add on to it. To me, this album just lyrically does nothing, and I think it's very weak lyrically, which surprises me that you would like an album that much with lyrics this contained.
Well, here's my thing is that, like, because first of
You're
all,
not denying it. You're not denying
I'm
it.
not denying it, but I can also say, like, Contraband also, that was to me the weakest point of that album was the lyrics.
Okay, but the lyrics are a lot more interesting, at least. Like
But
this,
they were either too spot on, like this album, like Fall to Pieces, or they were like they don't make sense at all, like Do It for the Kids or whatever that one is
that
called.
would make
Like,
some sense. Like there's some good lines in
no,
there.
there's like a couple songs where like I had no idea what he was singing about.
Well, okay,
but,
like Sucker Train Blues, Slither, yeah, throw those ones away with lyrics. But I think there's definitely some songs that have a little more interest.
yeah, I mean,
Or
I see what you're saying, but like with Alter Bridge, I come to terms like I'm not listening to them like I am with Tom Petty when it comes to lyrics or Bruce Springsteen. Like yeah, they're, you know, and I don't know, maybe Miles Kennedy, he's someone that writes like most of these songs, you look at the song title and like that's what the song's about. Like isolation is, you know, being by yourself. Slipping into the void is like, you know, falling into like this dark place in your life. Make It Right is about like making amends, you know. Like, you know, the only interesting song title on this album really is Cordy Lane, because like if you don't like know that that's like a place, you're like, what does that mean? And then Words Darker Than Their Wings, which unfortunately I just found out today that is a phrase from one of the Game of Thrones books, which I'm not a Game of Thrones person. And it sucks because we'll get to Words Darker Than Their Wings, but I agree with you. Like the lyrics are very, I won't say generic, but like what I do like about the lyrics is like it's like a message. Each song kind of has a message, but if the music is right, like for example, on I Know It Hurts or Make It Right, to me, the music is so powerful and so great that I don't mind that the lyrics are kind of surface level. And again, his vocals are so good that I can get past that.
it's just tough because these lyrics to me, they're so cliche. They evoke nothing in me, like nothing. But I think you made a good point. Like it seems like when he writes, he has like a purpose, like he's going for something, which I can respect. And even though, like I said, I his delivery of like the lyrics doesn't do anything for me really. Like other than like that part in like Slip to the Void, and I'm sure there's probably one or two other moments. But even though it does nothing for me, his talent as just being able to sing those incredibly hard parts, that mixed with his actual, yeah, I'm writing a song with an intention. Like that makes me I can at least 100% respect that, and it doesn't bring down the album too much for me. But when your album is basically down to just riffs and then melodies that I'm not always a fan of, it it does take a tumble down my rank.
I'm surprised you didn't like the melodies more because I actually think he writes like another reason I like
They're
this
all the
album.
same. They're
I don't think so.
predictable.
Like the reason I like this album too is because the verses are so dark. And again, it's just more this album than I would say like the majority of their music. The verses are so dark, but then the choruses are so some of them aren't as dark and they're more melodic and they're lighter. And I like that about the songs because it still has dynamic in that sense.
Well, and yeah, I mean, he can make a good chorus melody. Like, I don't. It's not necessarily a melody that interests me, but they can make like a catchy chorus that like is hooky, but not like annoyingly hooky. Like, so I don't mean like his melodies are bad, but like I don't know. Like, I feel like it's kind of the same case where like he could probably sing one of the verse melodies over a different song, and I don't think I would question it.
I will say that the choruses are more catchy than the verses, but there's some of these choruses like the vocal melodies are so like isolation, like that, just that little jump in the vocal or like
Yeah,
Fallout,
like
a song that you didn't like as much, like can you hear it somewhere in the fallout? Like I don't know, like it's very like you said, it's catchy and it's hooky, but it's not like overly annoying.
right, and but yeah, that is why isolation works so well for me because it's like it's kind of the best of the band. Well, like the best of what you hear on this album.
And there's some that aren't like All Hope Is Gone. I don't think vocally is as catchy for sure. Or Show Me a Sign, or but I don't know.
But
I still
for
think
me,
they're
like Show Me a Sign has the details. It has the details in there that make it stand out for me and makes it I guess just more enjoyable.
well. Okay, so now I want to ask you about some of my favorites that we haven't even talked about yet, which I either hope means you love them. Well, because you already said the three you would cut, and I don't really disagree with you too much. I wouldn't cut them, but I'm not offended you would cut them. So like let's talk about
And I just pulled these out of my ass, the ones to cut. I didn't plan that,
but I assume like those are more on the bottom of your list if
yeah,
you're gonna
they're
say you're
still
gonna cut
definitely at the
them.
bottom. But I don't want to make it sound like I have a vendetta against them.
So then let's talk about a song that I either thought you would love or hate. Ghost of Days Gone By. It's the third song on the album, and it's the first time on the album, maybe besides like the chorus of Isolation, where it's not heavy and it's not like as dark. Like it's almost like the verses, at least, unlike the rest of this album, the verses are they're a little poppy a little bit. So I'm curious if you like this song or not.
So I specifically remember when I was first listening to this, when that song started, I just thought to myself, "Oh God, like we're 3 songs in and we're already dropping in these cheesy." I'm not gonna say like they tried to write a radio song, but like a cheesy radio song. But the problem was it's just too good. It's a really well written song, and like they weren't trying to be heavy the whole time. And when they threw in the heavy bits, I think they flowed really well. And I think they transitioned, they didn't take me out of the song. And this song does have the depth and layers that I was praising on some of my favorite tracks for the album.
Yeah, because like in the choruses, it's what doubled, or it's the opposite. It's a halftime, right?
Yeah,
Pretty sure.
they do like a
Slower.
halftime type thing where
And
they
then
just do the pop kick drum for the verses.
yeah, and then you have a bridge that's really dark.
Well, I mean, I'm just throwing it out. I guess you do get some keys in the back of the verse.
Okay, they're
It's very
faint,
subtle,
though. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. It's those little details that actually really enhance these songs for me, and it's kind of a shame that they're so quiet in the mix.
Yeah.
But it's a rock record. What do you expect?
Like you get the part and the bridge where he's like, "I don't want to die," and then he just yells that he holds that note for forever. It's not even his most impressive note on the album by far, but the length that he holds it out is fantastic.
Yeah, it just sounds awesome. And it's like kind of what you needed in the song to keep the energy going. It's that contrast that contrast you mentioned where the choruses are a little happier sounding.
And I think a really good solo too on this song.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth
solo.
with Tremonti a little bit.
I did too.
Sometimes he does the slash where he kind of just shreds like kind of like pentatonic blues licks, and then he'll throws in some maybe like fast kind of metal sweet picking, and it can be cool, but sometimes it's a little too much. So I do really appreciate when he does these slower solos, like in that song. And hang on, there was one more that had like a slower solo that I liked. Gosh, I wrote it down. If I see it later, I'll bring it back up. But something I do like about Ghost of Days Gone By, and sorry to keep going back to Show Me a Sign, but I like how he sings the verses in that low voice. I actually really like his lower singing. It's a little fuller. It kind of has that vocal fry sound without it being like too gravelly. So honestly, I actually just enjoyed the fact that he was singing low. Yeah. So yeah, that was one of the ones like I would group like the three like
first three.
What?
Oh, they're saying you're like the first because they're the first three songs on the album.
Like yeah, I do really like the first three, but I was gonna say like for me, I kind of group Ghost of Days Gone By with Wonderful Life and Life Must Go On, and by far Ghost of Days Gone By is my favorite of those three.
And it has for sure has the most dynamics.
Right. Which once again, just to hammer in, I really liked when they they explored the song, they added the depth. I don't mind. For me, the little cheesiness I can get past just because of how well written this song is. And once again, it doesn't feel like they're just like, okay, let me just write something generic that like people will like. It felt like they actually like wanted to write that song. Which is refreshing.
Did you like, what about Breathe Again? Because I find Breathe Again to be the other like more upbeat tempo song that is more in a major key than, in fact, I think Breathe Again, it doesn't really even have a section where it goes like Ghost of Days Gone By has that bridge where it gets very dark and like lyrically and musically he's like singing I Don't Want to Die, and the music is like pretty like dark. But Breathe Again, I don't think it's kind of like Life Must Go On. It doesn't get dark at all, but it's more up tempo. So I'm curious what you thought of that one.
Yeah, this is one of the ones where I didn't really know how to feel. Because right off the bat, I can appreciate it for being not as dark sounding. Like that's a big, that's a breath of fresh air. And I guess it is a little faster compared to maybe the other happier moments. But there's nothing that necessarily stood out for me.
His vocal at the end?
Let me...
Because he has
what does he do?
He does a very long and pretty high up there vocal range, vocal sound. Let me see if I can pinpoint it. It's kind of near the end.
Oh, is it when you get to the heavy riff before the solo? Yeah, I think I just found it.
Yeah, and he keeps going up higher and higher and higher.
Okay, yeah. Okay, when that happens and you hear the harmonized guitars under it, that is a cool texture.
Yeah, so it's not like a top 5 on the album for me, but like that moment is a top 5 on the album. And I just love that song just for that part even.
Yeah, it's hard because like as we're talking about it, there's a lot of good things about it. But part of it makes me wonder that if we took this song outside of the album, how would it hold up? I mean, because this comes song 11 out of 14. And this is like the area where the album starts to kind of drag for me and starts to get lost. So hearing that song there, it's like I really appreciate it a lot. Like it feels nice in contrast. But is it that good of a song?
Well, I mean, like I said,
I might need some time to sit on that.
But I still probably like it more than Show Me a Sign, and probably still more than Still Remains. Even though it really sounds like Still Remains is, and Show Me a Sign are ones you both really like. Which I'm not surprised.
I mean, Still Remains. I do like the chorus and the groove, but it's a little more one dimensional. But I do like Show Me a Sign though. I mean, maybe that one will get old quick. I'm not sure. It is long, like you said.
Probably my second favorite on the album. And I really love I love the beginning of this album, but I love the middle. Even though Wonderful Life being like almost right, it's exactly in the middle. I still like Wonderful Life, but I love Make It Right, Wonderful Life, and I Know It Hurts. Specifically, Make It Right. Um, we can talk about I Know It Hurts first though, because I Know It Hurts. It's a little bit more generic sounding. It's definitely a
It's
heavier
shorter.
song, but it's I think like maybe the shortest. It is the shortest song. It's
3:55.
the only song
Or
that's in
no.
the 3 minute
Or
mark. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, sorry. I was looking at the bonus track Home. That was like
Yeah.
3:29.
So it's the shortest song on the album, but it's very like I Know It Hurts knows what it wants to be. It's like it's not a song that has like bridges and I even like long solos, but it's just like it's kind of a verse and chorus song, which I kind of like because this album does have it does have dynamics and it does have like different sections, definitely more than other albums, like more than a Death
But
Cab album.
okay,
But it's so
but
catchy. I know it hurts, and I get it lyrically. It's like we all fall sometimes. You're not the first. I know it hurts, but it's a very relatable. And I just love like I don't know. I love the tempo of it. It's like kind of a driving song, and it's just I don't know. I it was one of the ones that I really was attached to when I first heard the album.
yeah, I mean, I do like that it's a little more to the point. I do like the chorus. Like it's catchy. It's one of those choruses I don't really want to like, not because I just want to hate on it, but I do like it. And I like the pre-chorus a lot, kind of how it transitions. But I guess kind of like that verse with like the vocal melody, like it's kind of forgettable. It gets lost with the album. And I feel like that's kind of the thing for me is like sometimes we'll go to like a riff or something, like typically a verse where I know, you typically have like maybe lower energy, but a lot of it just kind of blends in. I feel
Well,
like the things that make these songs stands out is mostly the choruses, which I guess isn't like, it's not uncommon and it's not even a bad thing. But
well, I
I,
will say
but
I'll say this. I don't know what fans think of this album because I'm not really in that Alter Bridge fan base, but I do feel like from the little I've seen online, like it was liked by critics, but I think some fans, this is maybe their least favorite because it's kind of harder to get into. And again, I don't really know the first album, but I know Blackbird like had some of their biggest singles, and I know like the song itself is considered one of their best. And like Watch Over You is a big single. And I like some of the other singles. I like Rise Today and Before Tomorrow Comes. That's a great song. But their other albums, like the one after this too, which is also a great album, has a little bit more variety. And it's because I think this album is more meant to be a little bit of a very loose concept. It's not a very like there's other concept albums I'm sure we'll talk about in the future that are
I
way
think
more
a lot of
concept.
times with loose concept albums, they aren't my favorite because they're too in the middle. Like they're not just like, okay, these are like 12 songs we wrote and feel good about. It's more like, okay, like here's what we were going for but did not accomplish.
But I feel like
Which
if we were gonna spend like another hour on this album, I think we could like you could make as like if you follow the lyrics.
but the lyrics aren't worth following.
But
I'll
but,
follow the song titles. I'll do
but
that
that's
for
the
you.
okay. Well, then just follow the song titles because like I feel like even just looking at the song titles, like it's and maybe like the order of the songs is what makes the concept hurt because like you'll have like a Make It Right and then like 2 songs later, like I Know It Hurts. It almost feels like I Know It Hurts should be before Make It Right. Make It Right should be near the end. Like it's not like a what is that they teach you in like middle school? Like the hero's journey.
Hero's Journey, yeah.
The,
It
it
doesn't have
it
that same arc.
No, because it's like you get a song Breathe Again near the end, and like must go on, but then like Words Darker Than Their Wings lyrically kind of goes back into like the darkness of the album a little bit. But yeah, so it doesn't have that like arc, which I know makes it hard for concept. But I had a feeling because like I could have given you Blackbird or actually the album after this, which I was my second favorite, Fortress. And I feel like you probably would have liked those albums better. But I kind of wanted to give you this one not only because it's my favorite, but because it is a little bit more of a challenging listen, which some people like albums like that, some people don't, and I usually don't. So it is a little shocking that I like this album because of it. But I just like the darkness of this album. It's kind of like when I finally got into Pearl Jam's Binaural, it's because I leaned into the darkness, or even like Riot Act. So it's a lot of Queens of the Stone Age album. You have to lean into that to get into them. So I kind of felt like it was a little bit of a risk giving you this one as opposed to their other albums, but I was just curious to see how by the end of it, if you would like overcome it and be like, okay, I understand it and I enjoy it, or if you're gonna be like, yeah, it's not quite my style. And it kind of sounds like you're leaning more towards that way, which again, I'm not surprised, but I was curious which way you would lean towards.
Yeah, I mean, a little behind the scenes look. Like, I was having a hard time like getting into this album. And what I mean by that is I would put it on and like I genuinely was like, okay, yeah, this is a great start. Like I got this. But then like I would find myself losing a lot of interest or like attention. And I'm not sure if that's just because this album starts to really kind of sound the same in spots by the end. It is longer. But I also was like, this is something I don't normally listen to. So maybe I'm just genuinely trying to get used to that or figure
I
out
think
what I
that's
should
part of
look
it.
for.
That's part of it because I kind of had to do that with some of the albums you've given me. And we're gonna be getting into this actually next month. But like, I think sometimes you have to put your mindset in like when I listen to an Alex Smith album, like, okay, I'm listening to something that is like kind of it's actually kind of like he's kind of considered indie, like he wasn't on a big
Right.
label. And like the production sometimes is gonna be like lo-fi bedroom sounding. Um and then other times there's gonna be like grand lush production. And so like, but because I don't listen to a lot of him, but I have been more recently, like sometimes I have to get my mindset in that, it's not, this isn't one of those bands for either of us where it's like, for me, like maybe Pearl Jam or The Hip, or for you, like the Beach Boys, or STP, where you could just listen to any of their albums any of the time. Like you have to be ready for this type of album more so than
Right.
even the Velvet Revolver album.
And
Um,
I think you made a really great point about some listens being challenging. And I think that's an interesting concept because in theory you could say it's like, well, if an album is hard to get into, like maybe it's not that good of an album. But like for example, I really wanted to I don't know too much Pink Floyd, but I wanted to get into their album Animals because Les Claypool said he like performed that whole album live and I was like, Les Claypool's the GOAT, so it must be a great album. I had to listen to it like 4 or 5 times before I could finish the whole thing. But once I got it, I loved it. Like it's an album I really enjoy. I don't want to rank it and say like top 50, but it's a good album. I really enjoy it, and it was challenging. But now I appreciate the details. Um, and now I don't see myself having quite that same breakthrough with AB3, but it's something to consider. Every album is meant to be enjoyed differently, and once again, I think that kind of is one of the strengths about albums versus songs.
yeah, and I feel like I've been trying to do that too with a band recently. I've been, like you, it's like you hear about these landmark albums, and one I always hear about is My Bloody Valentine's album that I just forgotten the name of. Their big one. I'll have to look it up. But
I don't think I've ever even heard a song from them that I could tell you.
they're considered
Loveless?
shoegaze. Loveless, yeah, that's the
Whoa,
album.
whoa, whoa, wait, wait, wait. They're from the late '80s.
Yeah, and they I think were
What?
a band that kind of helped make the genre of shoegaze, which is a genre that
Shoegaze.
when I hear other bands do shoegaze songs, I love them. But that's usually like a band like Death Cab or Coldplay, bands that's not their main genre. So, and I always hear this album like getting a perfect 10 out of 10 or A plus. And I finally gave it a listen the other day on Spotify when I was at work. And other than like two songs, I just felt it all blended together. I wasn't in love with like the production or the instrumentation. It's hard to hear the lyrics. I didn't love like the vocals. So, but I feel like if I try to give it a couple more listens, I could finally understand it. That's the hard part, is like how much do you push yourself into like trying to like something? Some people won't. Some people, if they hear it the first time and don't like it, they won't give it a second chance. And I used to be that way, but especially with this podcast, giving each other albums, you're forced to have to listen to it at least 3 times. That's our rule on here. But I've been trying to do that with other albums and bands that maybe neither of us listen to. So I do like that concept of like, sometimes it takes more than a couple listens for it to fully connect. Because even with the band I love, like, the first time I listened to certain hip albums or spoon albums, I didn't love it on first listen, but then going back to it after hearing some of the other work, I'm like, oh, I understand this now. And so maybe this was the wrong album to give you for your first Alter Bridge. But I do think if you heard some of the other albums and you came back to this one, you would maybe appreciate it more. Because again, this is not a band that is in your wheelhouse. Maybe some of the genres that they play are in your wheelhouse, but not their particular brand.
And I think you kind of made a good point there. I mean, I think what you said was very well said. But kind of one more extension of that, kind of the context of the album with the rest of the band's discography, like maybe hearing where they started from, but just probably I'm assuming a more just here's a metal album, like this is sick, like, and then hearing them try to do something a little different, I could probably appreciate it. And I don't mean appreciate like I don't like it, but I could appreciate it. But it's like for me, like there's some Beach Boys albums that I know aren't that good, but I enjoy them more just because I have a connection with the band and I can see the progression in the writing and the band's personal life. Can I be vulnerable here for a second?
Yeah, that's what this podcast is for.
So I didn't know My Bloody Valentine was different than Bullet for My Valentine.
Oh my god.
And so that's why I was like, they're from the late 80s.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So clearly I got to do my homework here and find out who the hell My Bloody Valentine actually is.
Yeah, no, they're definitely they have similar sounding names, but
so when you were like, yeah, they're shoegaze, I was like, what?
Yeah, they're different bands. Not just by name, but like genres too. So I do, before we wrap it up, there's two songs I want your opinion on, kind of two that we haven't really talked about yet too much. And they're probably my two favorite on the album. Well, one of them is my favorite. The other one's probably top three. Make It Right. I love that song. I love how,
yes,
I love like the tempo of it. I love that it's like, I love the arpeggios. I guess, I don't know if that's like arpeggios, like they sound great. I love that
it's in 6/8.
Yep, it's in a major key for once on this album, but it doesn't, I don't think this sounds as corny as like Ghost of Days Gone By, like the verse, or Life Must Go On. I just think it's very like, it has just enough punch to it, but it's catchy. Like the chorus rocks out a little bit more than the verse does, which I like. I love everything about Make It Right. I think it's such an underrated song because I think they've only played it like once live ever.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think it's probably just because there's like a lot of like kind of like guitar layers?
Probably. Or maybe it might be one of those songs they tried playing it live that one time or in rehearsal and they're like, yeah, this doesn't sound as good.
Yeah, so I am a little surprised we didn't talk about the song sooner, but this is one of my favorites too. I to me it's kind of like a good mix between maybe like Ghosts of Days Gone By and All Hope Is Gone. Like it's majory sounding. It's got that kind of that 6/8 hustle. And this is the perfect example of nailing that Mixolydian sound with the major third. Like it's not as on the nose and it's used differently. And this was a song where there was like kind of a slower solo, but I'm really digging it.
Oh, that was the other song probably then you were talking about, right?
That was the one.
Yeah.
And I think the only kind of downside for me is that bridge with like the woes.
Yeah, not the
which isn't bad, and I like the riff with it. It's not bad. But yeah, I mean, this song, it's like 4.5 minutes, so it's pretty short, but the whole time I'm enjoying it. It stands out, and it genuinely has a lot of good layers that are like just really nice. Well done. Production's good on the song. Production is very consistent on the record, which almost kind of hurts it in a way. Like an album like Toxicity, System of a Down, it has very, very consistent production throughout, but it's done in a way where the musicianship really shines. And I think this album doesn't quite have it as transparent, but it does sound pretty heavy, pretty dark, pretty mean. So I think it really accomplishes that. So I do like the production. I think it is good for this.
Yeah, besides it's probably the engineering. Like it's probably one of those albums where it's compressed to hell, but
right. Who produced this?
What? I think they have. No, I don't think it's someone you know. So I'm
Don't
sure I could
don't
say it.
say Mr. Brandon O'Who.
No, no, it's not Brandon O'Brien. Someone. His name is Michael Basquet. His nickname is Elvis, and he's done I think almost all of Alter Bridge's albums. Let's see here.
Oh, really?
Fortress. He did Blackbird. So he didn't do their debut album, but he's done everything since. I think he's done Blackbird. He did this one. He did Fortress was the follow up.
Oh, he did Mammoth.
He did The
Shout
Last
out to
Hero.
that.
Yeah, he's done Tremonti's albums. So
Oh, great. He's
he
also done Limp Bizkit.
well, we don't talk about that.
Oh,
But yeah, so he kind of stays in this realm of music, and obviously he's done it looks like a couple Slash albums. He's done Miles Kennedy's solo album. So yeah, so I do like the production, but I'm curious about what you thought of the album closer because I think the album closers are my favorite on the album. Words darker than their wings. I love this song.
yeah.
But you haven't really talked about it yet, so I'm thinking you maybe didn't love it as much.
Well, kind of like where was it? Make It Right. I'm also a little surprised we didn't talk about it sooner. But that was okay. First off, I really do like this one. What's kind of interesting for me for the album is that I really dig as a whole, I like the first 6 songs a good amount. And I think that they don't blend in too much. I think they're all solid. I think Slip to the Void's one of the most dynamic on the album. But then otherwise, I only really get a couple highlights. Well, and looking back, it's not like there's a bunch of clunkers or anything. It's mostly like fallout to Life Goes On, Life Must Go On, where I lose some interest, but they come back. Words darker than their wings, and that is like I'm like, okay, yeah, this album does have some good moments. Even though it does the major third thing, I think there's a lot of details here that work good. There's dynamics. First off, elephant in the room here. I'm going to guess is that Tremonti singing in like that first verse?
Pre-chorus, yeah.
Pre-chorus.
Like he does it twice in like yeah. So Miles starts the verse, and then when it goes into the pre-chorus, it's just Tremonti singing, and then right into the chorus, they both they harmonize with each other.
Oh, they're actually harmonizing together.
Yeah, he harmonized I think on some other songs too. Like this was the album because up to this point he wasn't doing a solo project, and I don't think he was doing much backing. But this album is the first time he actually had like a lead vocal in a song, and then the next album he actually sings I think 2 full songs on his own, at least one for sure.
Well, I mean, I like his singing,
And then he did a solo album, his Tremonti solo project where he's singing and playing the whole time.
I'm gonna make a bold claim here because I have not heard any of Tremonti's work. I think Ishan may have showed me like one song or something, but bold claim here. Maybe you can verify. I will say I think Tremonti is one of those guitarists. So like when a guitarist or like a singer does like a solo career, like sure the vocals might be great, but usually the music kind of sucks unless they got like a good band.
Which is kind of Miles Kennedy's albums for me. And some people will hate me for saying that because I just can't. And sorry, really quick. He was like for a long time.
I can tell you how to get this off your chest.
After this album came out, and I became a fan of Alter Bridge. In between Alter Bridge albums, he was like, "I'm making my solo album," and I was like, "I'm gonna love the solo album because it's gonna sound like that first band he was in, Mayfield 4, mix a little with Alter Bridge. It's gonna be more focused on his vocal. It's gonna be less heavy. I'm gonna love it." And I've only heard it maybe once or twice through. I was just so because it's like he went too far in left field. Like he was doing like folky kind of stuff, like bluesy kind of stuff. And I was like, no, I was like,
yeah, that's exactly what I want to hear Miles sing.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to go back because he's done 2 now. And I only ever heard the first one. I didn't even touch the second one because I was so disappointed with the first one. I think people loved it. I think it was just, he was like teasing it for so long that no matter what he released, I think I was going to be disappointed. But I do think there's good quality to it. It's not like a bad album. It's just it was different than what I was expecting.
So okay, so kind of flip back to what I was saying. I went a little different route where you went, but I think you made a good point there. And I could totally. Now I'm very interested to hear Miles just scream out some folk music. But I think Tremonti is one of those guitarists that do a solo career that actually like have a really good voice. Like their vocal talent to guitar talent are both top notch. Like, Well, I mean, I guess I couldn't say his vocals are top notch, but like for example, Jerry Cantrell, another great guitarist who has pretty great vocals too, for like enough to actually be their own singer and to sound like a singer.
Yeah,
Um,
I've tried. I think
where
maybe Tremonti's first solo album. I think I listened to it way back in the day when it dropped. Cannot remember a single thing about it. All I will say is like the vocals are better than you think they're going to be, but I think the music was just it was even more generic than like Alter Bridge.
Yeah, I feel like whenever someone does something solo, once like when they're in a band for a long time, then they go solo. Usually, that first time they do it is kind of rough because, like you say, they either want to go the Miles route and go way left field, or maybe they, they're so focused on, okay, let me do everything myself. I want to do this myself, and then you get something that they think is like really emotional, and close to their heart, but it just kind of ends up, like you said, being generic and kind of swept under the rug.
Yeah, but no, I love his vocals on Words Darker Than Their Wings. The gray
Yeah.
is a good contrast to Miles. And I think the song's in 6/8, right?
Yeah, I didn't even write that down, but yes.
Which I think 6/8 is like the time signature they write in the most. Like they
4/4 and
actually,
6/8 is their thing.
yeah.
Which
But I
I don't
love,
always love 6/4, but it works really good on sometimes on the album. Like for example, Words Darker Than Wings, and then Make It Right.
yeah, I love that. I kind of like Make It Right. They're both kind of like start off with arpeggios, but I love arpeggios like in music in general. I love when like the Birds do it or REM does it, but the chorus is super
Good call.
catchy.
Callback.
I love the build into like the bridge. And then at the end, you get another kind of like Breathe Again, you get another really high pitch, long note from Miles, which I always love. Even if
And
by this point it's a little overdone, I still love it every time.
so yeah, you're saying with Breathe Again, that's one of your favorite moments. I actually, and listening back to Breathe Again as we did this podcast here, as we're doing it, I do, yeah, I kind of slept on that moment a little bit, but I had written down that for Words Darker Than Their Wings, one of my favorite moments on the album was when that super watery trem like wah guitar comes in, and then like the vocals are there too. Like that is awesome. I think my only one critique with the song is it feels a little bit slow paced, like with the chorus, because it goes like that kind of that slow down 6/8 thing. It doesn't feel as driving, and I kind of wish the song had a few more driving moments in it, just to really amp up that contrast between dark and heavy and stuff. But honestly, I like it, and I'm not really sure. This is one I don't know if I don't remember looking at it lyrically, but it's kind of a fun song. It was like the most fun on the album, and maybe that's just because Tremonti gets to sing for a little bit. Maybe it's just because it's kind of a not quite
Yeah,
triumphant, but it's kind of like powerful like that. It's not super dark
it's
sounding.
more in the vein of Make It Right and Life Must Go
Right.
On and Wonderful Life. It's not as dark lyrically as like Slip to the Void or whatever, but I wouldn't call it fun. I don't think even like Breathe Again on this album, I wouldn't say it's fun, but yeah, it's definitely more
Well, fun when you
triumphant is
pick
a
up
good
the
word.
band.
Yeah.
One of my favorite aspects about rock music is I don't know why, but a lot of times people can build like a personal connection with like someone like Elliott Smith, which I definitely did, and I cringe back to the extent of that relationship. But one of my favorite things about rock music is I feel like you can really connect with the band and see how they interact. You can be like, oh yeah, the boys were having fun on this song or something. And I think this was like this song, I don't know what it was, but it stood out to me. Like I felt the most connected with the band. Like I was like, okay, yeah, they're kicking butt on this one. Um, and oh, something I wanted to point out too, and I know this is a super small thing, kind of randomly jump to. Um, what song was it? It was. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry to do this. One of the songs had like a intro with like chords, and there was a cool, like a very subtle phasery sound on it. I think it was Coeur d'Alene actually.
Yeah, I was just about to say that sounds like that
Yeah,
one.
that was something I didn't really pick up until literally this morning as I was reviewing the album. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like those are the details that I think enhance this album. I just wish they were more prominent. Also, even though I like the bendy leads in Coeur d'Alene, I didn't really dig the solo. Like that was the only time I really did not like some of the guitar work because it felt fitting, but it did not feel organic.
Well, I know, um, believe it or not, and I'm not the person, I'm not the fan that could tell you which songs, other than a couple, but Miles Kennedy actually does some of the solos on this album, and actually
Oh,
on all their
on the
albums,
album.
on all their albums. Yeah, like
Oh,
on their next album, the opener, which is one of my favorite Alter Bridge songs, "Cry of Achilles." The first solo on the song is actually Miles, and you can tell because it's like a little bit more bluesy, less notes, is a little bit more melodic, and then the second solo after like the last chorus is the fast, shreddy stuff that definitely Tremonti. On this album, I know there's probably some songs where Miles does either like a lead guitar riff or a solo, but I couldn't tell you which ones. But it's possible that maybe that solo you're talking about could have been a Miles because he plays guitar on like every song, but there are moments of some of their songs and albums where he will do like the lead.
you know what's ridiculous? So I just started Googling as you were talking about that just to like look up maybe someone. I don't know how like in detailed or sorry, I don't know how devoted their the Miles Kennedy fandom is,
Yeah.
but I was just looking up to see if someone would post maybe what songs he soloed on, because now you got me really intrigued. And once again, in the same way that Tremonti is a really good singer, giving how good he is at guitar, Miles is a really good guitarist considering how good he is with his voice. So very, very, very respectable the band. But anyways, so I accidentally ended up clicking on Miles Kennedy's like official website, which is kind of funny because when you look at it, the URL, it looks like it says Miles Kennedy, LOL. But the first thing on his own thing is a picture of him with guitars and his whole entire signature products, a signature, several signature guitars, a signature microphone, and and then t-shirts. I don't know. That kind of rubs me the wrong way. But he seems like maybe he'd be a nice guy though.
I bet a lot of bands in this style of music has their own signature collections.
Yeah, but that was the first
But
thing I saw.
even like the bands I listen to, like Ben Gibbard from Death Cab, he has his own signature like jazz, Fender
Yeah, let me guess,
Jazz.
Jazz Master.
Yeah,
But
Spoon.
get this though. When
Britt
I go
Daniels,
to
he
his
has his
website,
own.
if I go to his website, that's not going to be the first thing I see.
Are you sure about that?
Okay, whoa. Why? Whoa. Benjamin Gibbard presents Teenage Fan Club's Bandwagon esque.
Oh yeah,
Available now.
so
What the hell am I looking at?
he has a website that just doesn't get updated because that was like a covers album solo album that he did like 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, he has a vinyl exclusively from Turntable Kitchen, so.
I wonder if Britt Daniels has his own website because he has his own like Fender, um, uh, uh not Strat,
Telly?
Telly. Yeah, he has his own.
Oh, yeah, that Texan. Of course he's got a Telly.
I don't think he has his own website, which makes sense because
Just Spoon has one.
he doesn't have like solo music. He has a side band other than Spoon, but he
Okay,
only
see,
has
I
like.
click on Spoon's website, and it's like where you can buy the music, where you can buy clothing, merch.
Well,
Like
yeah,
I feel like
because
that's more acceptable than here's my signature models, my signature. I don't know why signature microphone.
I'm sure when
upsets me
Miles
so
Kennedy
much.
does like a third solo album, that'll be the main thing you see on his page, not like you know. It's better. That's better than to promote than if you go like B&L's website and it's like buy a cozy with our album cover on it,
Buy a cozy.
like a beer cozy or like a
What?
uh
Wait, is that one of those things you put your beverage into so it keeps it cold?
yeah, or like you're buying a
Are you
Christmas
kidding me?
ornament. This is Bare Naked Ladies on it, or buy a coaster.
Is this an active thing here now?
Yeah,
Is oh my god. Well, I mean, you wait. So you click on their website, and then all you get is you get three buttons you can click. Out Now, which is their album, UK Tour 2024, and then Enter Site. After you've entered their website, you have to click Enter Site. Okay, we're gonna have to do a whole episode on band websites. I didn't
band
know how
websites.
upset I would get.
Well, when I click on it, oh yeah, I see what you said.
Right. Okay. But this is not that bad though. Like they even have a picture of them as like 8-bit people. Um, maybe we should do a podcast on that live performance you sent me of them.
Oh yeah, we might have to do.
An emergency.
I want at the end of the year. We haven't talked about this yet. Outside of the podcast, so I guess we can bring it up now. I definitely want to do an episode where I go over my top 10 albums of the year. Um, and it's just because a lot of the bands I like released new music this year, where for you, probably not. And I know you don't always keep up with like newest releases like I do. Um, and I'm gonna probably have a section where I talk about like my least favorite, like disappointments. And unfortunately, that new BNL album will definitely be on there.
Question: will you be counting albums? Like let's say, like for example, Heat Miser just released like a whole demo record. Would you accept something like that, or are you talking more like active band releases, like the Foo Fighters,
No,
like
I would
the
count if that's like
Isbell?
unreleased songs. I would count it. No, I would count it.
As long as it's like unofficial release, not just
It
like
probably wouldn't be like near the top. Just like for example, like I'm going to mention the Jason Isbell. He just did like a box set version of his probably most popular album, Southeastern. And in the box set, you have the remastered album. You have demos for almost all the songs on the album, just acoustic demos. And then you have a live performance where he does the album in its entirety. I'm not going to be counting any of those three as my favorite albums this year because it's all songs that he wrote and released like 10 years ago because this is 10-year anniversary. But I will mention it like in my box. Same thing with the Tragically Hip. We're doing a box set of their studio album Phantom Power, which is my favorite of theirs. And there are some demos, unreleased songs, but I'm not counting any of that.
right.
But
That's a re-release.
but
Let's be
that's it's not
real.
like a full. If they did a full album, like down the road, they do a full album of B sides and unreleased songs. I would probably count it, but unless every song is amazing, I won't rate it as high as like actual new material. So, um,
I mean, how could you?
yeah, like for example, this year I've been toying with do I include Death Cab's their newest album released last year. This year they did an acoustic version of the entire album, and I like it. But if I do include it on my list, it would probably be like 10. It really depends on because I think I'll barely have 10 albums. I think if I include theirs, which is
And
still
for
pretty
what?
good.
For number one, you're gonna put the Dead Milkmen's Quaker City Pills.
Are they still releasing new music?
Unfortunately, yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
There's a lot of bands that shouldn't probably be releasing music still.
Some bands they just have an expiration date. Some things just don't
Yeah.
work when you're old.
And we'll probably talk about that in a future episode because another album that is not even out yet, but I have not liked any of the lead singles is the new Core Kids album, which sucks because we
Mm.
just saw them live this last summer and they were great, but like their new songs were the ones I just don't care for. And they're pulling a Pearl Jam where like they're like this like their I don't know their eighth album and it's going to be their self-titled album.
Bands gotta stop doing that shit.
But so I definitely will have a list that's like disappointments, and they will be on it probably. I haven't heard the album yet because it's not out, but B&L will be on it for sure. And then I know Glenn Hanser's new solo album, the singles from it, I haven't been loving. It drops next Friday, so we'll
I
see
mean,
how I like it.
I'm kind of just going through albums released this year. A lot of surprises. I didn't know Bob Dylan released an album. Um, but I see Royal Blood is on here. Is that one that you've heard? I know
I
Lindsay's
haven't
a
heard
big
it.
fan.
We kind of fell off of them after their third album because their third album they're like we're gonna do synths and we're gonna bring in more instrumentation. And even though you think that would be
Mm.
better because it gets rid of their gimmick, the songs weren't strong. But we do like their lead single from this newest album. We just haven't heard it yet. So I might actually listen to it before the year's over and see if it falls in my top 10 or if it falls in the disappointing section.
Here, you can do a top 10 and a bottom however many. I'll probably do a top 3, top bottom 3. Not because I don't like
What are you
you
even going
know,
to include though?
what do you mean what am I going to include?
Because I'm trying to think. Most of the albums that I are on my list are like not bands you listen to, like Boy Genius, their debut album this year.
Okay, hey.
Well, there's a couple
I
just
have
forget.
time to listen to some of these albums.
I know you're gonna. I mean, I know you can include Ben Folds and Queens of the Stone Nation, Foo Fighters,
Right.
and technically you could include Weather Vanes.
But
But
would
like
I?
Gord Downey's new album, I'm gonna include on mine. Paul Langlois' new album. Like I said, Boy Genius, Glenn's probably new album. Um, Tragically Hip, or not Tragically Hip, I'm sorry, Spoon released an EP, which I'm going to include in my favorite EPs of the year. So,
You have a separate list for favorite EPs of the year.
well, there's two that came out
How
that I like.
many? Yeah,
There's
two.
two.
You can't list. Your list cannot
You
go through
you
two.
never know when the Killers were supposedly were supposed to release an EP as well. So there's going to be like three from bands I like. But in an interview, Brandon Flowers said that they're going to scrap it probably because they don't want to make that style of music anymore, which I'm actually really happy about because their last single was oof. It was not good. And the single before that too wasn't even I was not a fan of, but I was like, okay, this has a little merit. The new song I just like don't like at all. But yeah, you never know what a band they do sneaky EPs. A lot of bands.
Sneak peas.
Yeah. Okay, well, we got really off topic here. We've made this episode, which was already longer than it needed to be. So we'll wrap it up here. It seemed like you did enjoy some songs from this album. Maybe kind of similar to my reaction to Velvet Revolver earlier this month, where it's like there's a handful of songs that we both liked from both albums, but maybe as an entire album, it wasn't our, we didn't have the strongest reaction to it, but it was something
And
that we were able to enjoy because it was different than the albums we normally listen to.
and let me say this. This may be the worst album cover I think you've given me so far.
I
It
mean,
is
it's basically
so
their version
boring.
of Vitology.
But it's just so generic. I mean, it fits the music, I guess. So maybe in that way, it's actually one of the better ones.
Well, it's just
But it's just
I read
sucks.
I read that like when they were working on this album, they were just titling it AB3 because they're like, it's our third studio album, right? And then when the album was like done, they were just like, actually, we think AB3 just like fits. And maybe because they were calling it that for so long, they couldn't think of it as another. And I think they're a band that usually does like a title track. So maybe they were just like, none of these songs titles like is great. So I don't know. They just decided to call it AB3.
Calls the
But
album
yeah,
Wonderful Life.
God, but like the whole album is like, yeah, I mean, like the cover and the title, yeah, they're not really like jump out at you like listen to me, which is maybe why I like it too because like I find the music is so much better than the name or the album cover.
Okay,
But
that's
I agree
fair.
with you. It's probably the worst one I've given you. I don't know what the
Um,
best one I've given you, but
hmm,
we're going to
hmm.
be talking a little bit about this next month because next month we are celebrating 1 year of this podcast. So that's what you shall expect next month. We got a couple more episodes to wrap up this month. One of them, the last one of this month, will be our Halloween episode. Stay tuned for that. Next week we're still working it out, but we will be back next week with a new episode. But I think that'll do it for this episode.
One more thing here.
Oh
Final
yeah,
comment. Does it win the spin? If I saw this at Walmart and the only two records there was this one and the BNL one, I would take this one.
that's
Um,
good.
right, that's a good start. But in all seriousness, I think I kind of honestly have the same answer as you did last week with Velvet Revolver.
You only would get it if it was like on sale.
Yeah, if it was on sale. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, like if it was like, I don't want to put a price on it. I mean, it doesn't have to be $5. It doesn't have to be. You wouldn't really have to bribe me almost, but if it
Well,
was on sale, sure.
the good news is you'll probably never have to worry about um, whether or not you would buy it on vinyl because it was only released on vinyl the year of the album's release date, 2010. Um, well, okay, so apparently it was reissued in 2019, but only in Europe, and those reissues are like 50 and above because it wasn't a
Yeah.
super wide release, but like the original version of the album is like hundreds of dollars. So it's not one you probably would ever see at a store. I've actually bought one of their other albums on vinyl because I saw it at the store and it was pretty cheap, but was really the only reason I got it. But yeah, this album, I want this in my collection. I would love this in my collection, but it's probably going to need to have a wider reissue because the Europe one, even those are like 50 and up, which is, I mean, it's going to be a double AP or a double LP because it's a pretty long album, but I could totally see why you wouldn't like go out of your way to buy this.
Right.
So, but okay, that'll do it for this episode. Stay tuned for a couple more this month, and then next month, November, we're going to be celebrating our 1 year anniversary with some cool episodes. So stay tuned for that. Until then, we hope you take care and you'll be hearing from us soon. Bye bye.